All right, welcome to day one. How was it? How was it getting into God's word and then getting a little bit of perspective from that lay woman view, right? And just like simplifying it in a way that we can understand, in a way that we can make sense. And so today we're going to talk about day one and really unpack a few key things that I just personally love in Genesis. So the first thing that I want to talk about is just that commitment to truth and reality. You know, the tagline at Women Worship and Work is where biblical truth meets real life. And I remember when I read God's word for the first time, I realized how much truth that I was not just letting just absorb into me and into my life, God's truth, and just looking at the world around in comparison and not truly stepping into the identity and the plan and the path that He had for me. And so in Genesis 3:7, it says their eyes were opened. And unfortunately, many of us get into a season where our eyes are opened to a reality that we don't want to be a part of. And it is a reality that sometimes it is because something else somebody else did. Right? God gives us free will, and sometimes other people's decisions really impact us and they hurt us. Sometimes there's just a tragic event that just seems absolutely unexplainable. But here we are, we're in the middle of tragedy. And other times, kind of like what happened here in 3:7, their eyes were open to a mistake that they realized they made, that Adam and Eve made. And when we get into this place where we see this truth and this reality, where it is time for us to take a corner, sometimes it's time for us to own our situation. That'll really lead us into the second point that I wanted to talk to you about, and that's ownership. You know, in Genesis 3:12 to 13, you see that Adam, God asks what happened, and Adam blames the woman, and the woman blames the snake. And it reminds me of my kids. My son is a little bit older, and he'll, accidentally hit my daughter. And then I will get on to him and he'll say, well, she did this. And then my daughter will say, well, he did that. And no one wants to take ownership. And I just think sometimes we forget the importance of owning where we're at and owning the steps to move forward from it. Proverbs 28:13 says, whoever conceals his transgressions will not prosper. And so it's up to us. It's up to us to take ownership in our lives. And I do want you to know that I am so proud of you for taking ownership to get daily into God's word and to learn and think about things through a different perspective. It's stuff like this that God will meet you right where you're at. And that leads me to point number 3. God is sovereign. He is sovereign. He is in a place, He created the heavens and the earth. He created the heavens and the earth from the very beginning. And it says in Genesis 3:16 through 17, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day you eat, you will surely die. For in the day. There's another translation that says, for when you eat it. God knows. God knows we're human. He knows we're going to make mistakes. And as you journey through these videos, you're going to see a theme. This theme of God meeting you right where you are. And that Romans 8:28, which if you have grown up in a church at all, you have heard, right? God works out things for good. But I want you to think about Romans 8:28 says He works out all things for good, for His good. And so what that means is sometimes when we find ourselves in these negative situations, it doesn't mean that we were purposed to be there. Again, it might be because of somebody else's mistake. It could be because of our mistake. But what God does when we lean into Him, when we make the mistakes that He knows that we're going to make because we're human. Think about our kids, right? Think about our kids. We know our kids aren't going to be perfect. What He does is He takes those mistakes and He turns them into purposeful events that we can use for His good, which is ultimately for our good. And the last point that I wanted to talk to you about today that we don't go really deep in the reading is Eve as a woman. In Genesis 2:18, it says that God made a helper suitable. The Hebrew words for that are Ezra Kenegdo. Helper is Ezra, and suitable is Kenegdo. And that term helper, a lot of times it gets dumbed down some, like we're soft, we're just there to help, we're just there to serve the food. But that's not what it's about. It's only used about 20 times in the Bible. And most of the time, it is used to describe God and how God helps his people. You see people crying out to God, come help me, come save me, in the middle of a war in a way that they cannot help themselves. And so that word Ezer as helper is used most times to describe God and a few times to describe women. And that word suitable, kenegdo, a helper suitable, it's used one time in the Bible. And when that word was used one time and I learned that, I realized it was just this eye-opening moment on how uniquely God created us. He created you and he created me uniquely suited to go fill a purpose in our lives and a purpose for him. So I hope that you are seeing as we are journeying through Genesis until we get to Jesus, right? That we need to own our truth. We need to have our eyes open to truth and reality and take our ownership that we have in that and lean into God as a sovereign God and remember our power and our purpose as a woman. So I am so excited to see you tomorrow on day 2. Keep it going. Do not quit.